Hello, everyone. You're welcome to today's webinar. And this is week 6 of the online academy. And we have to talk about branding this week. So we have our presenter with us, and we'll be starting in a short while. So we'll just give a minute more for more people to join, more participants to join. And the moment we have a good number, we'll start the webinar. So while you are joining, you can use the chat option to, let us know where you are joining from. And thank you, Sharon. Welcome. So we'll have an idea of the demographic that we have with us now. Our presenter really loves to see the participants and scholars she's going to be talking to and where they are coming from. Thank you so much. So we'll be starting now. And you're welcome again. My name is Success Eugene Oduemena, and I'm the Leadership Skills and Development Coordinator for the Wells Martin Initiative. And it's my pleasure to moderate today's webinar. We have our presenter with us as well, Brenda Odhambo, and she's a Kenyan, and she will be presenting shortly after I read her amazing bio. So Brenda is a communication specialist with 8 years experience in corporate communications and public relations from both private and public organizations, and also from international development organizations in sub-Saharan Africa. She has experience in developing communication and outreach strategies and plans, production of communication materials, writing talking points and speeches, and all media relations. She has worked closely and continues to work with country teams and internal units on cross-cutting issues, assuming responsibilities of supervising communication lead in an organization to meet short-term and long-term project goals and objectives. Brenda holds a Master of Arts in Communication Studies, Public Relations concentration from the University of Nairobi. Currently, she works as the lead for the MasterCard Foundation Scholar Program Communications at United States International University in Kenya. So USIU Africa in Kenya. We are glad to have you with us today, ma'am. And I just want to encourage everyone before I finally hand over, please use the chat option, put in your questions. We'll be taking questions at the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions on branding before now, please use the chat option to put that down. And during the course of the webinar, if you have any questions, use the chat or Q&A to ask those questions. We'll be glad to attend to them. Thank you all so much for coming. You're welcome. Over to you.
Hey, hi everyone. My name is Brenda. As Success has introduced me, I'll be taking you through branding today. Before we start, I want to issue a disclaimer and tell you that I have a bit of flu, so if I go off camera, I hope you guys will understand. Okay, so we'll start. And branding is essentially you trying to differentiate your product or service from those of the competitor, right? So you're giving your product a very distinct and recognizable identity that sets you apart from your competitors, right? So a brand can be a service, which I'm sure most of you are offering. It can be a place, and it also can be a company. So I'm just going to open up the chat for a bit. I want you to tell me, just a few of you, where you think these brand names on the screen came from. So I'll give you a minute and then we will take your responses. So 1 minute, you tell me where you think each of these brands came from, and then we'll take it from there. Okay, Derek, nice. Ezekiel, I've seen your response as well. Anyone else would like to try? Mohammed, you guys really love Toyota, so I think I'll just go into my next slide. And this is where these brand names came from. So Reebok is named after an African gazelle. Nivea comes from the Latin word that means Snow White. Chanel #5, this was the fifth perfume made by the same company. Nike is named after the Greek goddess of victory. Toyota, as the three of you have said, a Japanese name. Rolls-Royce, the names of two men. One was a motor enthusiast and the other one was an engineering genius. So we'll delve a bit into the difference between product and brand, right? Sorry about that. So we all know water. It's a naturally occurring resource that you can go and fetch at any time should you wish. However, we find that there are so many water brands, right? And the reason why we have brands of water, something that is naturally available, is because they've been able to build brands around them, right? So a brand is something that cannot be replaced by something else, while a commodity can be replaced by something else. So think about your favorite toothpaste brand. I'm sure there's a brand whereby if you buy toothpaste, that's the thing that you're buying, right? But there's some things where it doesn't really matter what you're buying as long as it makes sense for that purpose, right? So in terms of branding imperatives, the first is that you must acknowledge that we live in a branded world, right? So seize every opportunity to position yourself in your customer's mind, right? The second is that you need to communicate a strong brand idea over and over again, right? To ensure that your brand identity sticks. The third is that you need to go beyond declaring a competitive advantage, right? Tell your customer in very many words or in your actions what makes you stand out from the rest, right? The third is identify your touch points. So at which points will your customers be interacting with your brand, right? And so if you have a very strong brand identity, then you're able to create sensory magnets that will help you to attract and retain your customers, right? When to start the branding process? Of course, when you have a new company and a new product, when you're starting a new business, right? You've developed a new product or you want to raise money for your business, right? The second time is that maybe you want to change your name, right? So perhaps your name no longer fits who you are and the business you're in. Perhaps there's been a conflict in trademark. Perhaps your name has a negative connotation in the market that you're serving, right? The third is when you want to revitalize a brand identity. So, yes, you have great products, you have great service, but you are not being seen as competitive, right? In comparison to your competitors, right? In the age of social media, perhaps your logo might not look the best on a digital platform. So, you need to change that, right? The other thing is that you want to revitalize a brand. So think about brands like Unilever, which have over 400 brands, right? So from time to time, they're able to carry out brand refresher activities just to ensure that they have that visibility in the markets that they're serving, right? And then myths and facts about brand. So brands are important because they create value, they build value, and they sustain value, right? So the first myth is that branding is about logos, while the fact is that branding is about creating meaning around a logo. So, oh, sorry, Juma. So branding is about creating meaning around a logo. So look at you have a fancy logo, fine. You say you're customer centric, but when I call you or when I call your customer service, I cannot get you on your line. So in that point, your logo means nothing to the customer. The second is that great brands make great promises. But the fact is that you need to make and keep a great promise. So here, if I'm telling you I will deliver your goods in 24 hours or less, then it needs to be that 24 hours or less that you're delivering. The third is that branding is an expense. Well, the fact is that it is an investment. So it's something that you need to constantly put money towards building. You need to do things like brand audits, like brand tracking studies, just to make sure that your brand is optimally positioned to compete in the market. The other myth is that it is a tactical tool, but it is a strategic asset, right? So each and every person in the organization needs to own their role in the brand. So what role am I playing in terms of building this brand, right? How can we optimize the brand? How can we make sure that we are constantly communicating the same brand message, right? The other myth is that brand responsibility sits with marketing, but it sits with the CEO, and this ties into being a strategic asset. If the understanding that brand is a strategic asset starts from the top, then it will be very rare, if I can say that, that the other staff would disregard such an importantly considered asset. The other myth is that companies create brand value, but the truth is that companies co-create brand value with their stakeholders. So it's not just about you telling the customer that this is the value that my brand delivers to you. It's also the customers telling you, through their comments, through the content that they create, that this is actually what your brand means to us, right? The other thing is that a brand's value cannot be measured, but the truth is that it can be measured. You just need to pay for it, right? So we've spoken about that, so I'll skip over that. In terms of the advantages of a brand, of course, the first is that it improves perceptions of your product performance, right? So the brand is what a consumer will judge you from. If you have a strong brand, then it makes sense for them to keep purchasing from you, right? If you have a weak brand, then it goes to say that the consumer might not be interested in whatever it is you're selling. It helps you to build loyalty. If I know that brand X has been able to be consistent over the years, then of course it will be brand X that I will continue going to, right? And the more I use brand X, then the more I'm able to convert other people to become users of brand X, right? It makes you less vulnerable to crisis. So you're consistent, right? You say your customers facing, you serve your customers. You say you deliver in 24 hours, you do those deliveries. So there's no one time where you'll be caught unawares about, maybe not being able to deliver in terms of your brand promise. Larger margins, I think it goes without saying, if you have a strong brand, then you're able to make more profit from your business. It helps you to increase the effectiveness of your communications efforts. You have a very strong brand, you have a very strong anchor that people can rally around, right? Your messaging is consistent, your imagery is consistent, so people are able to rally around your brand, right? It gives you opportunities to extend your brand. So think about a brand like Apple. Yes, it started as computers, but now they have phones. They had iPhone, they had iCloud. So you're able to build into other niches that perhaps you are not considered when you're starting your business. In terms of creating your brand identity, this is essentially the visual and emotional representation of your brand. So things like your logo, your color, your typography, the kind of photos you use, the kind of messaging that you put out, that is what creates your brand identity, right? So brand, everything that defines your company. So your color, all the things I've mentioned previously, basically. The brand image is how you're perceived by your audience and how we interpret the messages that come from you, right? Branding is the process of creating a brand, like we've discussed, and implementing a brand strategy to run your campaigns and increase awareness about your brand. In terms of the benefits, it creates a strong first impression, right? So a strong brand identity can be able to show a customer that you've thought about where your business is going, you've thought about what your business does, and you've thought about the kind of value that you want to add to your customers' lives, right? It builds trust and credibility, right? So the more consistent you are with your brand identity, the more people begin to trust you as an authority in the field, right? It increases customer recognition, right? So we've talked about branding as a continuous activity. So I'm sure when you see a McDonald's logo, right, you're able to tell very quickly that that is McDonald's, right? For the Kenyans, I'm sure if you see green, the first thought in your mind is usually Safaricom, even when the building perhaps is just green, right? And then it differentiates you from your competitors, right? It sets you apart and helps you stand out in a crowded market, right? It simplifies decision making for customers. If I know your brand, then there's no need for me to rack my brain trying to think about another product in that specific range. Enhances your marketing efforts. We've talked about building a strong um, anchor through which your customers can relate to you, right? So the first thing you need to do is to develop your brand strategy. So you've identified the product that you want to brand. You've identified maybe you have a name in mind. And so you decide that how am I going to differentiate myself? How am I going to position myself, right? What is my competitive advantage and my unique value proposition, right? You must make sure that it resonates with all your stakeholders. So think about your employees. Are they on the same page about what the brand means to them? Think about your customers. What do you want the brand to mean to them, right? So brand identity is not just developed by the CEO, or it's not just the preserve of the marketing team. It is developed by the whole company. It's something that the whole company must be involved in to ensure that there's buy-in into the idea, right? So sometimes you find that other people tend to hire marketing and communications consultants to assist you, or sometimes you find that the brand strategy originates with the owner, which I'm sure for most of you that will be the case, right? And a strong brand strategy is what makes sure that your company will be able to survive any turbulence, if I can put it like that. The next step is to identify your big idea. So, what is going to be the driving force of your brand, right? So think about Coca-Cola's tagline, share the happiness. So for them, it all revolves around that, right? So this is what is going to drive, how you're going to name your company, the kind of colors you're going to choose, the kind of messaging that you're going to put out in the market, right? Identifying your brand purpose. So think about why you started your business, right? So an example here is Tom Shoes, right? So the founder was like, great, I want to offer affordable shoes. But he went forward and said that his brand purpose would be to ensure that every shoe sold, every profit from every shoe sold would go towards helping someone access shoes, right? And as a result, the brand tended to resonate with people because of that purpose, right? So their purpose was giving back. So your purpose could be to make work easier for your consumers. So figure out how you're going to communicate that in a way that will be attractive to the consumer and make them want to associate with your brand, right? Of course, knowing your target audience is important. So fine, you have a great tagline, great name, great logo, sounds great in your head, but is it really communicating to your audience, right? So in terms of knowing your audience, figure out who are your competitors, right? Why are they buying from whoever they are buying from, right? What kind of language does your competitor use, right? What are their values and beliefs and interests, right? We know things like, religion or other demographic factors affect how people buy. So figure out what those things are and figure out how then your brand is going to communicate to respond to each of those things, right? So here it will be important to do things like, developing adjectives that will describe your brand to your consumer, right? And so here you're trying to just create an identity that one reflects your brand and two, your customers will find appealing, right? Knowing your competitors, I think this is fairly self-explanatory. So you do a SWOT analysis. So figure out what your competitors are doing. What are your points of difference? What are your points of parity, right? What are some of the gaps that perhaps your competitor is not addressing that you might have the opportunity to address? Excuse me. The next thing is brand architecture. So this is the hierarchy of brands within a single company, right? So here you can have the parent company, and then you have your subsidiaries, you have your products, you have your services, and all these things must work in concert to be one brand, right? So you must have consistency across all these elements, right? And so you need to decide what kind of brand architecture would work for your organization, right? So some of the questions you should ask yourself: what are some of the benefits of leveraging the same company name, right? Does the positioning of your new entity require that you distance it from the parent company, right? Will having a co-branding confuse the customers, right? Do you change your name or do you build on existing equity even though it was owned by a competitor, right? And how do you ensure that your parent company is visible, right? So an example would be FedEx, right? So FedEx is the parent brand here, right? But they've gone ahead over the years and they've expanded their offering. So they have shipping, they have e-commerce, they have freight, and each of these operating units has its own wordmark, as you can see on the presentation. In terms of types of brand architecture, the first is monolithic. So here you have a strong single master brand, right? And people relate to you based on your brand loyalty. So think about Google, right? They have Google Maps, Google Docs, Google Play Store, all the sorts of things you can imagine, right? Under that one single master brand, right? And so here the brand extension will use their parent's identity and have generic descriptors, right? Virgin Mobile, Virgin Air, Virgin Music, right? The other one is endorsed brand architecture. So this is synergy between the product and the division, right? So the product has a very strong market niche, but it also benefits from the association with its parent company. So think about Apple and iPod, Apple and iPhone, Apple and iCloud, right? The US Navy and the Navy SEALs, right? There's that. Each of them is a strong brand in itself, but they benefit from that endorsement from each other. The other one is a pluralistic brand architecture. So this is a series of well-known consumer brands, right? So think about Unilever and the number of brands that it owns, right? So the name of the parent might be of no importance, right? So maybe you have a company called Kimberly Clark, right? I'm a consumer of tissues. I don't need to know it's Kimberly Clark. I know that I use Kleenex. So that is a pluralistic brand architecture. The other one, the next section is brand elements. So these are all the things that oppose your visual identity, right? So your logo, your colors, how your packaging looks, the kinds of typography that you use, right? So the first element is your brand name, right? And if you have a wrong name, then of course, sometimes it might be difficult to break through the market and have people remember what your company name is, right? People usually imagine that naming a company is extremely easy, but the truth is that it's a very rigorous and exhaustive process, right? You can have a very fantastic name, but you find out it has a negative connotation or it is already trademarked, right? Sometimes people think that you will know a good name when you hear it, but the truth is that sometimes you need to test that name over and over again. And the more you test, the more you have to make changes to it. Sometimes people think they'll just do the search themselves. Remember that I mentioned the brand consultants. This is where they come in and they help you sort of make your search process cohesive. We cannot afford to test the name. You have to test the name, right? Maybe the name sounds great in your head, but when you say it, it has a different meaning. So a good name must be meaningful. It needs to communicate something about the essence of the brand, right? It needs to be distinctive. It needs to be unique. It must be easy to remember, to pronounce, and to spell, right? It has to be future oriented. So it positions the company for growth, change, and success, right? It has sustainability, meaning that you can use it at any one point over the next few years. Modular, it helps you to build your extensions with ease. Protectable, it needs to be trademarkable. Positive, it has to have positive connotations in the market served, right? And then visual, it can be easily presented in a logo, in a text, or in any applications that you have. So these are some of the common examples of misinterpreted brand names. The first is a brand called Irish Mist, but in German, mist means manure, so that brand would not work there. The other one is a brand called Shit. It's a French soda brand, but obviously I don't need to translate for you Shit what that means. The last one is Bonka, which is a shortening of Bon Cafe. Bonka, fairly rude word in English, right? Types of brand names. So, sorry. The first is the founder names. Ben and Jerry's, Martha Stewart's, Storyback. Kenyans, we know this example, Mudo Kinju Paints, right? So the downside of this is that it is inextricably tied to a real human being. So if this human being messes up, then it means the name will stop having any meaning for your customers. Descriptive names, so they convey the nature of your business. Toys R Us, right? So the benefit is that they clearly communicate the intent of the company, right? But the downside is that as the company grows, the name may become limiting and may not apply to all the things that you do. Fabricated, we have names like Interest, Kodak, right? Distinctive and easy to copyright, but you must invest a significant amount of capital to make sure that it sticks among your audience. Metaphor, right? Things like people, places, processes, mythological names, Nike, right? What, Zappos, Amazon.com, right? So all unique names, but a lot of work has gone into making sure that they're very memorable. Acronym names, so IBM, but the disadvantage for this is that you really need to first build goodwill or build visibility for the full spelling of your name, right? Magic spell, right? So here you have a word in English, but you take out one letter or you add another letter. A common example here is Netflix, right? Very catchy, very memorable, right? Combinations of the above. So you have maybe a founder's name and a generic name, or a founder's name and an abstract name, right? The other thing is the tagline. So this is a short phrase that captures your company's essence, your personality, and your positioning, right? For Coke here, as per the illustration, open happiness, right? And it shows what your brand stands for and what it delivers, right? And a great tagline can transcend the marketplace, can transcend the changes in perception, can transcend even the audience evolutions, right? Types of taglines, imperative taglines. So they command action and they start with a verb, right? Just do it. Broadcast yourself. Think different. Descriptive, they describe the service, product, or brand promise, right? You're in good hands, ideas worth spreading. Superlative, they position the company as the best in class. A diamond is forever, the ultimate driving machine. Provocative, they ask you a question, got milk. I'm sure each of us has seen some of these adverts online. Specific, they reveal the business category, the world's local bank, love the skin you're in, right? In terms of logos and symbols, so a logo helps to identify the organization, but it is a very critical marker for consistency for your stakeholders, right? And remember, we said that branding is not just about having a fancy logo, but it's all about creating meaning behind that logo, right? So in terms of the types of logos that we have, so word marks, a freestanding acronym, a company name, or a product name that has been designed to convey a brand attribute, right? I'm sure you've seen IKEA logos, the logo for eBay, Nokia, Pinterest, FedEx, among others. Unilever, so this is a letter form. So this is a unique design using one or more letter forms that acts as a mnemonic device. So think about IBM, think about if you have something like, okay, IBM is the example that comes to mind. We have an emblem, so a mark in which the company name is inextricably connected to a pictorial element. I'm sure I don't have to spell out what the green mermaid means on the right. We have pictorial marks. So this is an immediately recognizable literal image that has been simplified and stylized. So this is the Apple/iPhone logo, right? We have the Lacoste crocodile. We had the Twitter bird, which now became X. We have the NBC peacock, right? Then we have Nike, which is an abstract or a symbolic mark. It conveys a big idea and it embodies strategic ambiguity, right? Lastly, we have characters. So a character embodies brand attributes or values. I'm sure each of us is familiar with the logo on the left, right? And of course, a good character becomes a star of your advertising campaign and they become cultural icons. Think about something like the Michelin Man, right? Everyone knows who the Michelin Man is. And if I told you to draw it right now, I'm sure you'd probably be able to come back up with that image. So a signature, this is the structured relationship between your logotype, your brand mark, and your tagline. So in this case, the entire logo of this is the signature. So it has the logotype, which is Spectrum Health. It has a tagline at the bottom, which is for a better life. The brand mark is this dynamic square with blue and going towards green inside, right? Of course, the signature can be either vertical or horizontal, depending on how you want to apply it. In terms of the other element, you have brand typography. So this is the font or the font that your business uses, right? So Coca-Cola, I'm sure this font is extremely iconic. The Toyota, all uppercase red, very iconic as well. In terms of font categories, we have serif fonts, Times New Roman. So if you want your brand to be traditional, classic, reliable, right? We have Garamond, we have Bodoni, we have Palatino, and all other kinds of fonts. In terms of sans serif, very minimal, very clean, very contemporary, right? So if you want your brand to be seen as futuristic, to be seen as very modern, you have Helvetica, Droid, Verdana, Futura, among others, I'm sure you've seen. For script, this is when you really want to stand out. You really want to look unique and you want to emphasize a special purpose, right? Handwritten. So this is all about being artistic, being creative, being fun. You want to present yourself as very playful and approachable, right? In terms of choosing typefaces, you need to choose a typeface that matches your brand personality, right? So if you want to look professional or corporate, you choose a minimal sans serif. If you want to convey trustworthiness, you choose a bold serif header. If you want to be youthful, you choose a thick and rounded sans serif, and so on and so forth, right? So typography is important because it gives a brand meaning, right? It can be able to connote to the consumer the kind of values and the kind of tone your brand has. It can define how people experience your brand, right? From color, from images, from the text, right? All these are the some experiences that your customers have with your business, right? It shapes user perception and build brand recognition. If you saw the Coca-Cola logo type, there's no explanation for what immediately jumps into your mind, right? The other element is color, right? Colors are very inextricably linked to emotion. And of course, we know that colors have cultural meanings across the world, right? For instance, you find that red is a very auspicious color for the Asians, right? And so if you have a bank in China and it lacks an element of red, then no one is going to bank with you, right? On some areas, you find that, black may be perceived as being modern and cool, but for other people, black means death, right? So in terms of food and restaurant colors, some of them opt for warm colors that draw attention and evoke appetite, right? So rich browns, reds, oranges, greens, right? To promote that connection with nutrition and well-being, right? Then we have high tech, right? Most tech companies either use blue, which symbolizes trust, or they can go with orange or colors like neon green, just to signify that they are very future facing, right? We have health and wellness. Most of them choose blue again for cleanliness, trustworthiness, and responsibilities. We have colors like green that represent nature and wholesomeness, and orange, which talks up the vitality that you'll experience as a result of using that specific brand, right? In terms of your brand colors, of course, you have to choose your core color, which is going to be the most associated with your brand. I'm sure each of us knows the Tiffany blue on my right. And when you're looking for a primary color, look for one that embodies your business the best, right? So experiment with various shades and tints. So a shade is when you add a bit of white to the color and see what you end up with. A tint is when you add a lot of black and see where your colors will lead you to. Of course, you have to pick secondary colors. And so these are divided into three categories. So you have analogous color schemes. These are close variants of your primary color, right? So if you have red as your primary color, you can use other colors like orange and yellow that go in the same color families, right? You have monochromatic. These are different shades and tints of your primary color. So if you have blue as your primary color, your secondary colors can be light blue and dark blue. And then if you have contrasting color scheme, so this could be either complementary, which are across each other from the color wheel, or a selection of equally vibrant hues, right? So these help your colors to pop and give you very fun, very modern feel. Of course, you have neutral colors. So yes, you focused on your brand color. Your brand color is blue. But remember that you need to print these things in real life. So choose, right? Tell us, okay, so yes, my logo is blue, but when I'm doing photocopies, this is how the logo will look like in black and white. This is how the logo will look like in gray. This is how the logo will look like when rendered against a dark background, right? And then the other thing you need to do is to implement strategies to establish your brand identity, right? We've said that brand identity is built over time. So what strategies are you going to use to grow your brand awareness? So it could be building a robust social media presence, right? Using Facebook, using LinkedIn, using Pinterest to communicate, right? It could be placing advertisements in the newspapers, in magazines, in TV and print. It could be saying that you want to deal solely in content marketing, right? So making sure things like your website and your online reputation match the brand goals, right? Of course, making sure that your communication is very consistent with the actions as a brand. Brand reviews, we've said that brands, they are not static as much as we want them to be. So you need to be able to be in a position to keep changing it to adapt to the marketplace, right? So sometimes identities can become out of date. Maybe you started as a health startup and now you want to go into education. So in that case, you need to update your brand, right? Maybe your audiences, your stakeholders are tired of it and you decide, okay, fine, let's do something else to make it pop, make it more relatable to our consumers and the people we are trying to target. You also need to pay attention to your customer experience, right? So yes, you can have a fantastic brand kept up to date, but your service is poor, right? And that will destroy the kind of equity that you've been able to build around your brand, right? So ensuring that you have a very strategy to provide a very wonderful brand experience to your customers, right? To make them brand ambassadors for your brand, right? So brand performance, like we've said, can be measured, right? And the best way to do this is to do brand audits and tracking studies, right? So brand audit, you look at your brand in a specific amount of time. So let's say in the past 3 years, right? What has been the perception of your brand? How has it been able to perform in the market in comparison to its competitors? A brand tracking study, on the other hand, it's a bit more dynamic. So here you're looking at maybe quarterly or maybe yearly, right? How your brand is performing against the set parameters or how you're performing against your competitors in the market. So one of the world authorities on branding, Kevin Keller, devised a list of actions that can be used to judge the health of branding in your organization, right? And the first is that your brand portfolio and hierarchy make sense, right? So here, this means that you're not trying to leverage your brand into areas where customers would not accept it. So think about Toyota trying to launch a range of hospitals, right? That extension would not work for them. So are you doing the same thing? Or have you been able to properly identify the niches that you'd be doing well in? The brand is properly positioned, right? So a good brand is one that has been able to consistently develop and maintain a strong positioning for its segments, right? BMWs have positioned themselves as the height of excitement in driving. Mercedes-Benz have positioned themselves as, status and quality engineering, right? You must excel at delivering benefits that the consumers really want. So fine, you can have a fancy brand, but am I experiencing value, right? So think about something like an iPhone. I know people who say they can never use Android and they use iPhones until, when they stop making iPhones, right? The brand is given proper sustained support, right? So think about brands like Nokia and BlackBerry, right? They started off strong. They were some of the biggest brands in the 2010, but for one reason or the other, they fell off the map. And I'm sure right now, if you ask someone what a BlackBerry is, they probably would not have an answer for you. And then you monitor your sources of brand equity, right? So fine, you have a strong brand, but where is your equity coming from, right? Who are your champions, right? Who are the ones talking about your brand out there, right? The brand's managers understand what the brand means to customers, right? And so here I'll give an example of USIU Africa. For us, our tagline is education to take you places. And you find that it doesn't matter when the person graduated, even the people who graduated in the 90s, they'll write to you and tell you, look, I'm working at organization X, and I can say that it is truly because USIU really gave me an education to take me places. Right? So we'll go into brand essence. And this is the most compelling thing about your brand that differentiates you from other brands, right? So think about Volvo, right? Very synonymous with safe travel. Disney is synonymous with fun family entertainment. So the contributing elements of brand essence, the first is authenticity. You need to make promises and you need to keep them as a brand. Consistency and coherence. If you're not consistent in providing what you promised you will provide, then that element of consistency goes out for the consumer. Uniqueness. How different are you from your competitors? Relevance and value, right? Is your brand offering something that is of relevance to your customer? Durability and sustainability. So your brand essence remains over time. Even if your packaging changes, even if your logo changes, your essence, who you are at the heart of it, does not change. Single-mindedness. So sticking to the thing that keeps your brand focused, right? So the first thing is you need to learn how to stay on message, right? You've identified what your brand voice is, so you figure out how you're going to stay on that voice, right? Make sure that you're distilling the essence of the service or the product that you're offering, right? So if you have a memorable message, think about open happiness, right? How that evolves and how that is communicated. You must ensure that that specific USP or that valuable thing is communicated frequently and often to your customers, right? The other one is brand authenticity. And this is all about ensuring that you're keeping your promises, one, as a brand, and ensuring that your messaging is something that the customer can relate to. So when they're relating to your company, they're not feeling like, this person is sort of putting on a facade, or they're not giving me, what they promised they'll give me, right? Coherence. So ensuring that all the pieces are held together in a way that feels seamless, right? So having a unified voice, right? So what is the one thing that you want your audience to know about you, right? Your strategy. So yes, you might have a master brand, you might have all these other sub brands, but how are you perceived, right? Are you operating from one script? Each and every touch point. So even if I'm buying from the web, even if I'm buying in a shop, right, the brand experience must be the same, right? The look and feel. So you've said your brand color is red, you've said your font is this Futura. So you ensure that each and every single thing you produced adheres to those guidelines. Then you have uniform quality. So it doesn't matter where I am, I must know that the quality of whatever I'm accessing from you as a brand will remain the same, right? Clarity and simplicity, clear language to communicate about your products and services. You must be flexible. We've said that we need to keep on doing brand architecture reviews, right? So looking at your market, how is your market evolving, right? And how can your brand evolve along with the market to make sure that they're not left behind? In terms of your brand architecture, right? You need to have a very durable and flexible architecture that can be able to anticipate any future changes, right? You have to be fresh, relevant, and recognizable, right? So we'll talk about the brand guidelines, but essentially your brand guidelines should be able to guide this element of brand flexibility, right? So where do you hope to go in the future? And how will those evolutions look like for you as a brand, right? The other item is brand asset management. A brand is an asset. You need to protect it, you need to nurture it, right? And it needs to come right from the top, right? So an example here is Deloitte. And they have one brand, they have presence across almost all continents. They have thousands of employees. And so they decided that they were going to create a hub in which people would come and they'd be able to look at how the brand could be applied, right? And so, you've given people, you've become very open with them. You've told them this is our brand, this is our understanding of the brand, and this is what we want to achieve with this brand. And so people are able to have that very buy-in, which is extremely strategic for you, right? Creating value. We've talked about showing your brand as what can I call it? As a creator of value, right? So if I tell you that I want a delivery service that can deliver in 24 hours, then your communication must be able to reassure me that you chose my brand and you chose it because we deliver in 24 hours, and this is how we're able to deliver in these 24 hours, right? And so the more you communicate that, the more you're able to build that understanding in your customer's mind that yes, this brand definitely creates value, right? The other item is brand differentiation. So there's thousands of brands. When you go on social media, you're assaulted by lots and lots and lots of brands. And so you must be able to ensure that your brand is able to stand out, right? So curate your offerings. Find a way in which that, yes, you're feeding your information to your customers, but you're doing it in a way that is very interesting for them, that would make them want to engage with you, right? Sustainability. Brands are messengers of trust. And so people are reassured by trademarks that are recognizable and familiar, right? So, yes, your logo can change, right? But at the very heart of it, are you still offering, if you're founded on the premise of offering swift solutions, are you still offering those swift solutions to your customers, right? Yes, you're offering swift solutions, but will you be able to do so in the future? Or if not, what are you going to do in the future for that? Right? So I'll stop my slides there and invite questions from the group.
Wow, thank you so much. That was a very rich presentation. And really, it's very important how our brands speak. And I think our brands speak louder than our than our business plans and all those paperwork. Because just like you mentioned, we just see a picture, and the moment we see it, our mind goes back to the experience this product or this service gave to us. So thank you so much. That was very rich. I have a lot already.
Oh, you're writing?
Yeah, yeah. So thank you. I'm
Okay.
going to give like 2 minutes for more questions to come in.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to use this time to encourage everyone to please use um, the lessons that we've gotten here to develop your business plans, your CBO, NGO plans. And so at the end of the day, you have a well-crafted business plan that people would want to identify with. So
Yeah.
yes, we have a question here, and it's asking, the person is asking, like, does does my brand influence the kind of investors or fundraisers I allow in my startup?
Yes, I think you've seen where there are situations whereby a brand is founded on specific principles, and then, sort of like the people who invest in end up corrupting what the brand stands for. So yes, it definitely affects, but I think that is up to you. Of course, if you create a very strong brand, then you're able to attract like-minded people to be able to be part of your brand, to be able to grow together with your brand.
So the more diverse or flexible the brand is, the more possibility to get investors from different parts. Because I'm just thinking of a brand that talks about food, and an investor is coming from the area of medicine.
Yeah.
It's going to, yes, it's going to be quite a difficult thing, except there is a link that you've created for that. Thank you so much. And
Exactly.
the next, yeah,
It
go
doesn't
ahead.
even have to be about the flexibility. It can just be an issue of tweaking your messaging, right? We all know that food is one of the building pillars for nutrition and health. And so you figure out how you can craft your messaging to respond to that specific thing.
Thank you. So this is another question, and it's saying when you talked about the myths and the facts around branding, you
Mhm.
mentioned that branding is an investment. So how much
Yes.
percentage of my um, business budget or startup budget should go to branding?
Good question. The true answer to that question is that there's no specific figure that I can mention, but think about things like sponsorship, right? Like CSR, whereby you say, okay, in addition to me providing this product or service, I'm going to give back to the community in this way. So maybe it could be 10%, maybe it could be 5%, whatever you're comfortable with. So there's really no tangible figure for it, but it's all about where you want to go and how you position yourself, right? It could be things like sponsoring, like let's say how Coca-Cola sponsors the Olympics, right? I think in the past Olympics, they spent about $65 million, right? So you could make it either a percentage of your profits or a percentage of your overall operating budget, and then take it from there as you continue.
Thank you. So this question is kind of similar to the last one, and it's still talking about cost. So it says like as a communication specialist, do you know of any cost-effective software that I can use to create my brand, or must a human specialist be involved?
Well, if you're experienced, you could use Adobe to create your own brand. You could use Canva. It's fairly affordable as well. There's quite a bit. There's a few, free logo makers if you search online. But what I'd advise is that you need to just have a brand consultant that you can talk to, who can be able to give you a way forward. As we've mentioned, we've talked about things like testing your logo, right? Looking to make sure your logo does not look like something else. So there's that human element that is needed. But yes, you can definitely use things like Canva, like Adobe to create your own logos.
Thank you so much. And we have more questions here. And Derek, I think Derek is asking, what evaluation criteria can I use to measure the success of my brand?
So you can look at things like your brand awareness. So how many people can be able to recall your brand, or how many people are aware about your brand? You can look like things at brand engagement. You can look at things like top of mind awareness. You can look at things like brand recall, right? If you stopped five people and asked them to tell you 10 brands in a specific category, where would your brand come? Would they remember your brand, or would they fail to remember your brand? I'll include that in the slides as well. I have some slides on that, so I'll include that um, in the slides for anyone who will want to read more about that.
Thank you so much. We have more questions, and this is from Rosemary. She's asking, is it possible to recreate a brand if the first one you created does not come out successful?
Yes, it's very possible. You just need to define, okay, so what did not work in the first instance, and what do you want to communicate, right? And so remember we said in the beginning of the slides, whereby we were looking at when you need to um, communicate. We've seen brands come back from what they were, and they've been able to evolve. And sometimes the evolution could even mean, okay, yes, at the very essence of it, you know that you're a product or you're a service that provides a specific value. But maybe your name did not resonate. So you decide to change your name. Maybe it is your tagline, maybe it is your colors. But yes, it's very possible. You just need to refocus the brand strategy that you have, refocus your messaging, refocus your pillars, and then take it from there.
Thank you. That's very helpful. We have a long question here from Mori, but I'll try to read really fast. So we'll attend to more questions. So he says, thank you for the wonderful presentation. Here are my questions. What are some key strategies for building trust and credibility through branding for a CBO NGO working in a specific community or cause? So that's the first question. He has two more. So would you like me to read everything or you would answer
I think
one after
we can just answer. I think here the main strategy would be remaining consistent, right? So you've said that your brand stands for X. And so when I come to the NGO, right? Am I, let's say, accessing health, in a very dignified manner? Am I accessing health in a way that is very related to my concerns, right? Are we communicating because yes, you can have a strong brand, but if you're not really communicating about it, then it really fails to make a landing. Then the other thing that I would recommend is that really knowing who your audience is, right? So knowing your audience is knowing their ages, right? Because of course, at every age, people have different ways in which they consume information. Their locations, right? So maybe there are locations where maybe there's no internet. So how are you going to reach out to them? Right? Maybe in a specific location, there are adherents of a certain religion. How are you going to negotiate those cultural and religious barriers? Right? And then the kind of channels that they have access to. So yes, you can say you want to focus on social media, but there are people on community radio. There are people who only listen to radio. There are people who only take information when it comes from their local leaders. So how are you going to make sure your messaging is related to all these things and is able to be communicated regardless, sorry, of the specific local that it is in. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So it's similar to the next one where he asks, in what ways can branding help a CBO NGO stand out and differentiate itself from others in the same space? It's easy. I think where it's coming from is that it's easy for a business. Somehow people are willing to pay for a service, but how can, as a non-profit, you distinguish yourself with similar non-profits in the space?
I think it comes down to your brand elements. I think knowing who your clients are and what they consume and how they consume. I think it is knowing the kind of language that they speak. I think it is even the choice of things like imagery really helps, right? So if it is a health NGO, what are you showing in your pictures, in your videos, right? It's the kind of content that you're producing, right? Is it just in English, or have you taken the step to make sure that it is very digestible for the person right at the grassroots, right? Of course, sometimes it may be hard, but I think for NGOs, I'd say it's all about communication. It's all about how your message comes across to the audience, right? So making sure that you're really going down to the brass tacks. You're not alienating your audience, right? So you're really talking to them. You're not talking at them. You're talking to them and you're talking with them and you're giving them opportunities for them to give you their feedback and you're relating based on that.
Thank you so much. And without knowing, you answered the third question talking about communication.
Okay.
So I would go to another question we have in the Q&A. So Francis is saying thank you for the presentation. And how does one ensure that their branding is safe from other people that are not part of the firm, like so they don't replicate this product?
Um, that is tricky, but remember that we said one of the strong aspects or one of the aspects of a brand that you needed to keep in mind was how unique and how trademarkable it can be. So it's all about ensuring that, at every step you're testing, at every step you're doing things like focus group discussions, just to make sure that your brand really is something that can be able to stand up on its own. I think the other thing maybe would be to, wow. Yeah, I think those are my two strong ideas for now. So yeah, I definitely recommend make sure that it stands out, make sure that your communication is beyond and above what your competitors are doing. And yeah, just trying to make sure that you're really, really differentiated from your competition.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Brenda. This was a great webinar, and I'm sure everyone can put in the chat. If you think this was awesome, please use the chat option. So should know how great it was. And another thing to add to that last question, I think you spoke about something regarding brand asset management, and I think it's something related to patent rights also. So
Yeah.
yes, that's something that could work, but I don't know how expensive that would be, getting those organizations to protect your intellectual property. So, but then thank you so much. We are very glad to have you today. And we are going to have this similar webinar on branding, but we'll be talking about creating your brand guide on Thursday. So please on Thursday, be present, and we'll talk about how to create our brand guide, and it's going to be very much practical as well. So thank you, Brenda. Please, do you have any last words before we sign off?
Yes, I'm going to leave my email address in the chat so that anyone who has any questions can reach out to me. Yeah, so I've just done that. So anyone who has any questions can just reach out to me on my email and I'd be happy to respond.
Thank you for the opportunity. So everyone, with this, we've come to the end of today's webinar. Thank you all for attending, and we'll see you all again, same time on Thursday, and we'll say bye-bye for now. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.